Hello student, welcome to the lecture on repatriations, and after this lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives. Understand the concept of repatriation, discuss about training and development, describe the structure of repatriation process, understand the concept of MNCs and HR policies, explain the international migration law and ILO. Let's start with a brief introduction to the topic repatriation. Expatriates and expatriates have become an essential part of international management and companies' success in the global market. Expatriation is the process of sending managers to another country to run a subsidiary of a multinational organization. After completing their international assignments successfully, the expatriates return home and then the process of repatriation begins. Repatriation may be defined as the activity of bringing an expatriate back to their home country. Repatriation is the final step in the expatriation process. Repatriation is a process in which someone that has been living abroad in the United States, in this particular case, returns to his or her country of origin. Repatriation process. There are several important things in repatriation process or at risk of being in repatriation. Phases of the repatriation process. Preparation. Provision of information to the expatriate to facilitate the return to the home country. Example, checklist of the things to do in the host country prior to departure, closing accounts, payment of bills, etc. Physical relocation includes activities such as removing personal effects, breaking ties with colleagues and friends, and traveling to the home country. Help to the expatriate and his or her family is usually provided by relocation consultants or firms. Comprehensive and personalized relocation assistance serves to reduce anxiety, stress, uncertainty, and disruption experienced by the expatriate and his or her family. Phases of the repatriation process. Transition. Phase in which the expatriate and his or her family reaches to their return to the home country. Some companies hire relocation consultants to assist in this phase also. Typical activities include acquiring temporary accommodation, making arrangement for housing and schooling, performing necessary administrative tasks, example renewing driver's license, applying for medical insurance, opening bank accounts. Readjustment. This phase involves coping with reverse culture shock and expatriate career demands on the organization. MNCs and HR policies. To get a clear understanding of the relationship between MNCs and HR policies, IHRM can be defined as the set of distinct activities, functions, and processes that are directed at attracting, developing, and maintaining an MNC's human resources. The relationship between the parent company and its subsidiaries affects how HR policies and practices are managed across countries. Research approaches to HRM in MNCs. The international perspective on HRM is concerned with the MNC's management of geographically dispersed employees in relation to gaining both local and global competitive advantage through HRM. In this way, the IHRM perspective is said to provide universal best ways of arranging the HRM function, that is, models of IHRM policies and practices that fit the competitive context, and is in this way neglecting the specific competitive context, including these institutional environment. An effort is made to bring these two perspectives together in the sense that the focus is strategic and focus on the management of geographically dispersed employees in subsidiaries relative to the parent company. HR policy. Now let's understand how HR policies will lead to better firm performance both in relation to shareholders and stakeholders. Pay and performance management. Performance management can be described as a cycle consisting of 5 elements. Setting performance objective, measuring outcomes, feedback of results, rewards linked to outcomes, and amendments to objectives and activities. Within this cycle, performance-related pay such as bonuses and rewards in the form of shares and performance appraisal are key components. Training and development. Training can be defined as activity leading to skill behavior, whereas development is a process of becoming increasingly complex, more elaborate and differentiated by virtue of learning and maturation. These two activities are increasingly being recognized as important due to the rise of overseas competition and the success of economies that invest in employee development. Employee involvement and communication. Employee involvement (EI) and communication cover a broad range of mechanisms, which makes an all-encompassing definition problematic. Involving employees in organizational policy making could possibly improve employee motivation and consequently performance. Trade unions. Trade unions are traditionally part of the IR research field, but in this study they are subsumed term under HR policies, as trade union relations are often part of the HR functions responsibilities in large MNCs. A trade union is an organization that, among other things, unites workers and unions leaders to protect their common interests, such as negotiating wages, working conditions, and take collective actions to enforce collective bargaining terms. International migration law and ILO. In the broadest sense, the term law refers to a framework of principle that determines how a society functions. International law always means public international law, not private international law. Public international law is a separate system of law and must not be confused with private international law. International migration law refers to the sum of these international responsibilities. There are a number of norms and areas of concern that limit the authority of states in migration matters. These are described in the important points below: human rights, non-discrimination, freedom of movement, asylum, non-refoulement, family unity, procedural guarantees in areas such as detention or expulsion, the duty of states to accept their returning citizen, consular access, human trafficking and migrant smuggling, other areas regulated by international agreements, for example, labor migration or irregular migration. Internal migration law important points. Internationally accepted human rights impose limits on what a state can and cannot do to persons within its territory. There are a number of human rights known as movement-related rights that are particularly relevant to migrants. International human rights treaties generally include a non-discrimination clause which provides that states must ensure human rights to all people within its territory without making distinction of any kind, including race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other indicators of status. Non-discrimination rights requires that states' laws and policies must not discriminate against migrants. All persons have a right to seek asylum, but a state does not have a corresponding legal duty to grant asylum or allow asylum seekers entry to its territory. The authority of state to use national law to regulate who may enter, stays in, or must leave its territory is limited by international law relating to family unity and to the best interests of the child. States are not free to detain or expel aliens at will, and expulsion cannot be arbitrary nor can it be discriminatory. The duty of states to accept returning nationals is generally accepted to be a norm of customary international law. International Labour Organization (ILO). The International Labour Organization (ILO) is the United Nations agency devoted to advancing opportunities for women, men to obtain decent and productive work in conditions of freedom, equity, security and human dignity. Its main aims are to promote right at work, encourage decent employment opportunities, enhance social protection and strengthen dialogue in handling work-related issues. The ILO is the only tripartite United Nations agency in that it brings together representatives of governments, employers and workers to jointly shape policies and programs. Employment and income, productive and freely chosen employment is at the core of the ILO's mandate, and the organization is committed to full employment. The ILO identifies policies that help create and maintain decent work and income policies that are formulated in a comprehensive global employment agenda worked out by the three ILO constituents. Decent work. Decent work means better prospect for personal development and social integration and freedom for people to express their concern, organize and participate in the decisions that affect their lives. It entails equality of opportunity and treatment for all women and men. In globalizing world, the role of the ILO in promoting strategies for a fair globalization was backed by the report of the World Commission on the Social Dimension of Globalization Standards. The ILO has since adopted more than 180 ILO conventions and 190 recommendations covering all aspects of the world of work, employment and income. The ILO is particularly concerned about the massive unemployment of young women and men. Nearly half the world's unemployed are young people, and it seeks to help them and their governments through policy advice and concrete training and employment initiatives.
Every year, millions of women must leave their loved ones. They migrate in the hope of providing their families with a better life. Tragically, many fall victim to labor trafficking and a life of abuse and exploitation. It's nothing less than modern slavery.
অনেকদিন পর্যন্ত আমার স্বামী চাকরি ছিল না, এতে আমি প্রচুর পরিমাণ ঋণ হয়ে গেছি। আমি বৃত্তি চেতে চাই শুধু দারিদ্র্যের অভাবে।
প্রথম 1 বছর 8 মাসের মতো আমি কোনো যোগাযোগ করতে পারি না দেশের সঙ্গে।
2 দিন 3 দিন পর দুগা ভাত দিত খাইতে।
Trapped in jobs far away from home, they work long, punishing days, have little food, and often face violence and intimidation, especially those working in private households.
আবার আর একটা ছেলে ছিল, ছেলেটা খুব অত্যাচার করত আমার সাথে।
কিছু কইলো তো পাহাড়ে মাইরা হালাইলো।
অনেক সময় আর কি চাইতো যে আমার লগে যায় কিছু নারী নির্যাতনের কোনো কিছু টিয়া করতে, আর কি এরকম একটা ভাব দেখাইতো।
গরম পানি ফিকা মারতো, এই যে আমার এগুলি সব পুরা ফেলাইছিল হাত পা।
But a new groundbreaking project supported by UK aid is set to help improve women's lives. It's called Work in Freedom. It aims to reduce the misery of girls and women from Bangladesh, India and Nepal who are trafficked into forced labour, particularly into domestic work and the garment industry. The aim is to help prevent 100,000 girls and women falling victim to the worst aspects of trafficking and forced labour. The programme is all about giving girls and women control over their lives, making sure women are aware of the risks, have access to training and support, know their rights and have the skills to get decent work. Helping girls to stay in school so they can get better jobs and eventually earn more. The aim is to invest in girls and women so they can work in freedom and lift themselves, their families and communities out of poverty. For some migrant women who found safe and regulated work, that's already starting to happen.
এখন উন্নতি হয়েছে, যেমন আগে আমার ব্যাংকে কোনো টাকা ছিল না, এখন আমার ব্যাংকে টাকা আছে। যেমন আগে সমস্যা ছিল একটু, এখন এই সমস্যাটা আমার নাই, এরকম ধরনের উন্নতি হয়েছে।
Better regulation of the recruitment industry will be vital to weed out illegal practices and extortionate fees charged to migrant women. Work in Freedom will help ensure the recruitment industry improves its practice. It'll bring together governments to do more to protect the rights of all migrant workers, but particularly women. It will also work with trade unions, with big brand companies, local factories and lawmakers. Its goal, to create a world where girls and women can work free from fear, violence and exploitation.
Employment-related placement. An employment-related placement is defined as a field education arrangement in which the student is granted written approval from the field coordinator to complete her or his placement in an agency where the student is currently employed. Following is a list of criteria that must be met for approval of an employment-related placement. An employment-related placement will be allowed for only 1 year of the social work field experience. The field instructor must meet all regular school requirements for the program level proposed, be a person who is different from the student's work supervisor, and at the graduate level hold an MSW degree with 2 years postmaster experience, LMSW preferred. Agencies selected for an employment-related field placement arrangement must meet the regular criteria for the program level proposed. Undergraduate or graduate must sign the school's affiliation agreement and agree to all curriculum and other requirements of the school. Students are required to participate in a one-day campus-based orientation seminar offered locally for distance education and off-campus sites. The student must maintain concurrent enrollment in the respective practice courses and meet all academic requirements of the school. 8 hours of placement will include performing regular job responsibilities as defined in the job description, with certain responsibilities, tasks and activities outlined for educational purposes. The remaining 8 hours of placement will require working in a separate department or unit within the organization with new responsibilities, tasks and activities. Benefits and analysis. Job analysis is the foundation for all assessment and selection decision.
Identifying essential duties and responsibilities of each job provides the basis for the job description document. What are the specific duties for each job? What are the performance standards? What are the working conditions? What machine and equipment are being used on the job? The job specification describes the minimum qualifications of the individual performing the jobs. What is the educational level required by the individual performing those jobs? Does the individual require a specific skill? Does the individual require, for example, conversational fluency in Spanish? Must they have working knowledge of spreadsheet software, such as Excel? Job analysis is the cornerstone for all of HR. The job description and the job specifications provides, for example, recruiters with the essentials for marketing the organization's jobs and establishing a qualified pool of candidates. For example, the job requires a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. Any applicant with less than these qualifications is not a qualified candidate. If the individual has a master's degree in electrical engineering, then they exceed the minimum qualifications and remain in the pool. Additionally, these documents establish the criteria for selecting individuals with the best qualifications. If an individual is selected without the minimum qualifications, then the company may face a legal issue. Additionally, these documents provide a guideline for training and for assessing an individual's performance on the job. These documents also provide the basis for establishing the wages upon which the individual will be paid. For example, the compensation for coal miners is based on the hazardous working conditions that they must face in the performance of their work. Job descriptions and job specifications form the basis for contract negotiations with organized labor. Employers need to know the essential duties of each job in order to make decisions about providing reasonable accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So how do you go about conducting the job analysis? The job analysis will require an analyst to gather information from the current employees, supervisors, and managers. It is incumbent on the HR to inform the employees about the reasons for the job analysis and how the information will be used by the organization. One way to gather information from a large group of individuals is through a questionnaire. Another method is to observe the current employee performing the job. I once videotaped the operation of a bookbinding machine with a crew of 5 through the complete cycle of setup, production, and cleanup. A third method is to have employees keep a journal of their activities for a period of time. This could be combined with any other journals that the employee must maintain as part of their normal job duties. For example, at the printing company where I worked, the pressmen were required to maintain a log of the press operations throughout their shift. This log listed problems, solutions, and general notes about the operation of the press and the crew. Finally, the analyst could interview the incumbent, supervisors, and managers to gain an understanding from the 3 different levels about the work that is being done.
To identify the best person for the job, it is crucial to fully understand the nature of that job. Job analysis provides a way to develop this understanding by examining the tasks performed in a job, the competencies required to perform those tasks, and the connection between the tasks and competencies. Job analysis data is used to establish and document competencies required for a job, identify the job relatedness of the tasks and competencies needed to successfully perform the job, and provide a source of legal defensibility of assessment and selection procedure. Training and development. Training and development play an important role in the effectiveness of organizations and to the experiences of people in work.
So why are training programs important for business?
Training is very important for business these days. We need to start looking at training as an investment, not as an expense, as we have in the past. Studies have shown that companies that invest the most in their people actually outperform their competitors when it comes to shareholder value. What I'm actually saying here is that there's a link between training and the bottom line. It's important that a business start to look at this. We know Canada's been lagging behind in terms of productivity, and one of the ways to invest to increase that level of productivity is to look at training as one of the options. We know that, for instance, it can generate better results than investing in equipment, for instance. So it's very important that business look at training issues.
In what ways can companies expect to see a return on their investment?
Well, it makes sense that, first of all, a properly trained employee is better suited to meet the expectations of the job better than someone who's not trained. So first of all, there would be a return right there. And then employers can start to see the results like a reduced accident rate. That's a huge one. That impacts the bottom line immediately if you can drive down your accident rate. Redundant work, fewer errors, faster cycle time to competency on the job. These are the kinds of things that employers should be looking for as results from their training. We're also seeing that younger people especially are looking for a commitment from their employer on training, on their career path and their career development. So employers can look at training as an investment in those people that will turn out to be a retention tool, and that's a very important issue. Thirdly, I'd like to point out that a learning environment in the workplace tends to be a very rich, innovative, creative environment, and that can foster creative thinking and new ways to look at issues and new ways to solve problems. So it can have many, many returns in different areas.
What kind of training is beneficial?
Certainly, what needs to be done in terms of looking at the beneficial training is to look at what are the business needs. There's no point in actually training for the sake of training or for deciding, something new is happening, let's train everyone. We need to decide first, what are we trying to achieve? And how can training support driving towards those business goals? So let me give you an example. If a company's decided that their rate of customer satisfaction is lower than they would like or lower than their competitors' customer satisfaction rate, then they may deem it that training is required for a certain number of employees, not necessarily everyone, but a certain number of employees on customer service. That then supports that goal to raise the level of customer satisfaction. And then, of course, it's important to measure to see that have we achieved what we set out to do. There's no point doing it without being able to say whether or not results were achieved.
Training has implications for productivity, health and safety at work, and personal development. Any investment in training and development is generally regarded as good management practice to maintain appropriate expertise now and in the future. The relevance of occupational psychology to training and development. Contributing to training has long been one of the main concerns of occupational psychology. This is not surprising, given that training involves learning and that learning is a central issue in psychology. The discipline offers many benefits and perspective to help resolve training issues and problems and has now become part of the routine practices within human resource management. Opportunities of employment in training and development. People with an occupational psychology background have been employed directly by governments in areas such as job training, military training, and health and safety. The other major source of employment and funding in training and development where occupational psychology plays a specialist role is private companies. Specialists might be employed directly within an organization, training and development function, or in consultancy offering services to clients. aims and objectives, relate concepts and principles from the psychology of training and development to real occupational issues in order to make a constructive contribution to organization, recognize the psychological assumption made in making training and development decision and to manage these assumptions appropriately, appreciate the contextual factors of real organization and work situation that affect decision concerning the application of training and development concepts. Summary. Now in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. HR policies will lead to better firm performance both in relation to shareholders and stakeholders, yet the underlying features of each HR policy area measured in this study will be described below to give insight into the 4 policy areas and how they relate to performance, as well as indicating how subsidiary autonomy might differ in importance according to different HR policy areas. Performance management can be described as a cycle consisting of 5 elements: setting performance objectives, measuring outcomes, feedback of results, rewards linked to outcomes, and amendments to objectives and activities. Within this cycle, performance-related pay such as bonuses and rewards in the form of shares and performance appraisals are key components. Furthermore, performance appraisal is used for setting objectives and giving feedback in relation to performance generally. Pay and performance management is linked to overall organizational strategy. The purpose of setting these objectives is to monitor, direct, audit, and motivate individual performance and to develop a committed and loyal workforce. Performance management system is often used in relation to development of management, where performance appraisal is used to identify development needs and for giving feedback to managers about their levels of performance and to reward the achievements of higher levels of competence. The idea is that variable payment schemes performance-related pay makes employees identify more easily with organizational goals by linking compensation to overall organizational performance or individual performance. This might include that employees get a commission and share in the gain when the organization performs well. Rewards and bonuses can be given to employees through financial participation using example, employee share ownership schemes to link rewards of individuals to the overall unit of the business units.